So we're at a very exciting point in the travel narrative here as Jesus has set his face toward Jerusalem. So I want to do a screen share. I want to recall the structure of this narrative, these main themes, because we're going to run into some real troublesome texts in this chapter. So screen share. All right. So you're familiar with this structure. You have it in front of you, perhaps. And we've moved through Didache type material, that is behavior patterns of positive behavior patterns of what discipleship looks like, and the conflict that presents with the way the religious authorities are viewing doing the will of God in Israel. So we've run into already the structural conflict over money, issues related to money with the Pharisees. That's going to come up again today as we get into our text. I also want to remind you of the themes from the prophet like Moses, because we're going to run into this too, about this generation that is stiff-necked, how Jesus is sent to be the voice of God, and how this generation rejects Jesus. And there's an ergo, there's a therefore, there's a consequence to the rejection of this message. If this message of Jesus is rejected, that means that Jewish society and culture is going to end up in chaos and destruction. Okay. Now, when we start Luke chapter 12, we've just come off the end of chapter 11, where it says the Pharisees were plotting to kill him. They are not to kill him, but to trap him. So at this point, now there's a conspiracy against Jesus. We've got to figure out a way to get this guy kind of thing going on. They've already accused him of deriving his power from the dark side. They've accused him of that. Now they've got to figure out how to get rid of him, because he's also, remember in chapter 11, Luke drew from Matthew 23 all the woes on the scribes and the Pharisees. And even the lawyers got upset. And Jesus said, woe to you lawyers. And so here we are now at chapter 12. Now, Mark simply says they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only one loaf with them in the boat, and he cautioned them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of the Sadducees. Now you might be thinking to yourself, this is really weird. They're in the boat, they say, we got just one loaf of bread, and Jesus starts talking about leaven. Okay, well, he's just come off in the text with these major conflicts with the Pharisees. So he's trying to say something here. Now, Matthew records when the disciples reached the other side, they forgot to bring any bread. They don't have any bread in Matthew. Jesus said to them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, whereas Mark has, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Matthew's turned that into Pharisees and Sadducees. Here's Luke. In the meantime, when so many thousands of the multitude had gathered together that they trod upon one another, he began to say to his disciples first, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. So Mark's narrative is tied to the image of the bread, the leaven. Matthew has turned this leaven from the Pharisees and Herod, the Herodians, the courtiers, to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Interestingly enough, now the Sadducees get wiped out with the destruction of the temple. They are the priestly aristocracy. They are the ones that get carted away. It's their wealth that gets distributed, on and on and on. So there are no Sadducees after 70 CE. So you might ask yourself, well, why is Matthew mentioning Sadducees? Why do the Gospels mention Sadducees at all? Why don't they mention Essenes? Well, in the later rabbinic tradition, as it develops in the second century, by the time you get to the Mishnah, which is codified by Rabbi Judah the Patriarch around the year 200, the Mishnah contains plenty of debates about the Pharisees and the Sadducees and nothing about the Essenes. What we're dealing with here is the remnants of tradition. This is really important here, because had the gospel writers clearly just made things up based upon their own time and space, had this, they would have had no need to mention the Sadducees at all. Okay. So, excuse me. Luke, however, is the only one that defines the leaven. He calls it hypocrisy. And this is going to become an important little key here for interpreting the next piece of text that it is in itself very problematic. So, just with Luke, the leaven of the Pharisees is hypocrisy. They don't practice what they preach. And what they preach is a burden to people. Okay, so they don't take the burden on themselves, they lay it on the people. So here's how Luke continues. Nothing is covered up, and this is a section, by the way, from the missionary discourse in Matthew 10, where Jesus sends the disciples out on a mission in Matthew 10. He tells them they're going to be persecuted, and he's letting them know that everything will be revealed. So Luke cribs this piece there from this missionary discourse. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. This is directly related in Luke's mind to this hypocrisy. Okay. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. There is this eschatological sense here that everything gets revealed. Motives, intentions, everything gets revealed at some point. It doesn't say when. It says this is how it's going to be. And then you have this. I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. But I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has power to cast into Hades, or to Gehenna. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Holy cow, I come across a text like this and I just sit and I go, oh Lord, have mercy. What is Jesus doing here? If I can establish from all kinds of other texts that Jesus does not view the Satan and Gehenna through a certain lens, a sacrificial lens, then I come to a text like this and I immediately have to shake my head, because who has the power to cast into hell? Well, first, you go to the commentaries and they all say God. They all say God. This is God. There's a reference to God. And I sit and I shake my head, because while it might be true that God has the power to cast people into hell, it is also true that this category of some kind of eternal conscious torment doesn't seem to be a part of the historical Jesus thinking. Yes, it's possible one can find it in Matthew. I don't think it's quite the way people think in Matthew, but it's possible one could find it there. However, and one can certainly find it in the Revelator, in the book of Revelation in chapter 19. So if it's not God, is it Satan? Does Satan have the power to cast into Gehenna? No. So we have to ask, how are we to understand this text? And in order to do that, we have to understand the term Gehenna. Gehenna is the valley of Hinnom. It's where the potter's kilns were. So that's, the potters had to keep their ovens stoked constantly to keep them hot as they were making pottery, but it was also An area of it was the trash dump that was burning. So it's a dump, and it's not a great area, but it has a history. And that history was that during the time of the in and around the exile, the Valley of Hinnom was the place that the Israelites would use to perform child sacrifice. So to be cast into Gehenna is to be sacrificed. Okay, if that's the case, if we're dealing with something sacrificial here, who, after don't fear the one who can kill you, don't fear the authority that can come down on you and say, you're dead. Who has the authority then to cast you as a sacrificial victim? The mob. That is, there is the one who can actually do the execution. They're not to be feared. It's the mob that is able to control the narrative in such a way that when you're sacrificed, you're automatically deemed evil forever. Now think about this. When we sacrifice our victims as human beings, we create myth, what Girard calls myth. Myth is the way we tell the narrative in such a way that the victim deserved what they got. Okay? We've seen how one of the very few places we find myth in the Hebrew scriptures is that story of Achan in Joshua chapter 7. Now, if we are dealing here with the mob has the ability to control the narrative about you. Is it still the case today? And the answer to that is yes. It is the mob, the majority, that determines how history is written about one. If the mob has used you or someone as a scapegoat, then the entirety of that narrative has to be oriented toward justifying the actual scapegoating. The best example I can use is Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler is seen as the preeminent example of evil. And that's why when there's concern about trying to compare others to Hitler, the Hitler's like sui generis, he's unique, one of a kind. When that is, there is no way that if you were to try and write a book about Hitler that like kind of excoriated him a bit, you would be taken to task because the mob has already determined he's in hell. That's the mob's determination. So Jesus is not here saying, hey, you have to fear God because he's going to cast you into hell, because immediately following this, he says, are not 5 sparrows used for sacrifice sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God. In other words, if sparrows can be sacrificed and they're inexpensive and God recognizes every one of them, are you not worth more? Why, even the hairs of your head are numbered. Fear not, you are of more value than sparrows. And I tell you, everyone who acknowledges me before other humans, the Son of Man will also acknowledge before the angels of God. But the one that denies me will be denied before the angels of God. So, this text it cannot be used to justify, I don't think, any kind of notion of eternal conscious torment. So what is Jesus doing here? Let's go back to the Pharisees. He's accused them of hypocrisy. He said that their intentions are going to be made known. And he's trying to tell his followers, just as Matthew does in Matthew 10, that where there is mission, there is going to be persecution. They go hand in hand. You with me on this? I haven't even looked at my notes. I got to look at my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah. So this reference to the mob has already been made clear in Matthew 11 in the woes of the scribes and the Pharisees, where they are the ones that gild the tombs of the prophets that their fathers killed. Same theme running through this text. And so, as a result, the bottom line for the disciples is they don't need to fear the executioner, and they really don't need to fear the one that casts them into hell, because if they are sacrificed by the mob, and sparrows are cheap and the Father cares about the sparrows as sacrifices, surely the Father will care about you and will not let that narrative then claim your legacy. All right. Yeah, in verse 12 now, verse 10 through 12, we have when they bring you before the synagogues, the rulers, and the authorities, do not be anxious how or what you are to answer or what you are to say. Again, this is that theme of persecution. If they will end up being brought before authorities. And Luke says, the Holy Spirit will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say. Mark just simply says, don't be anxious what you're to say beforehand. Say whatever is given you in the hour. Matthew has, say what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. But Luke inserts here that it's the Holy Spirit that will tell you in that very hour. Okay, now there's this lovely little text. It's only found in Luke, so he's gone back to his source, where it comes from the Hebrew gospel. One of the multitudes said to him, "Teacher, bid my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus said, "Man, who made me a judge or a divider over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of all covetousness, for a person's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And now we're going to move into a new train of thought here, all about possessions and money and discipleship. But let's come back to this text. This fella is recognizing Jesus as someone who makes good judgments. Okay? He makes good judgments. And so normally, these kinds of cases would be adjudicated by the elders of any given community that sit at the city gate and gather together, and they function as the judges, or there might even be in larger locales more official channels and judges that one would use. But here, this person's treating Jesus as an elder. He's treating him with respect, and he says, "Hey, my brother and I are fighting over this inheritance. Can you come and take care of this for me?" And notice what Jesus does. He refuses. He refuses to take sides. He refuses to take sides precisely because it has to do with money. He refuses to take sides. Okay? I won't say anything further here, but a text like this seems to me to be a text that could be used to argue that Jesus was certainly not a social justice warrior. He's not interested in creating some kind of Marxist communist regime where everything is equal amongst all. That's not what you see here. What you see here is Jesus refusing to participate in that system. Immediately in Luke, and only in Luke, comes the parable of the rich fool. Now, here's the thing about this parable. He has a crop. 1 year, he has a crop that's really plentiful. And he says, "Man, what am I going to do with this? I've got this abundance in my crop." He says, "I got it. I'll build bigger barns, and then I can store my crop, extra, the abundance, and I can sell some of it, and I can eat, drink, and be merry. And Jesus says, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and all your great retirement plans are going to go out the window. And the upshot, Jesus says, is the one who lays up treasure. So is he who lays up treasure for himself, is not rich toward God. The question that brings this all together is, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. What were the options available to this fella from the perspective of Jesus? Now, remember, we're going to get the flip side of this when we get to as we're moving down the chiasmus, the other side, with Zacchaeus, who will give up half his fortune, make reimbursement to those that have been stolen from, and he still ends up a reasonably wealthy man. But he's just given away this. This is the opposite of this fellow. This fellow could say, you know, I've got this abundance, I'm going to share it with those that don't have. But he doesn't do that. He only thinks of the abundance in terms of himself. We see this theme running throughout Luke. We've seen it in chapter 6, in the Didache section, give and it shall be given to you, over and over and over again. Now, Luke is going to continue this by coming back to Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. So we're in the midst of a Didache section, a teaching section, a behavioral section. And he says to his disciples, don't be anxious about your life, what you shall eat, about your body, what you put on. You know this text. You're very familiar with how much God feeds the birds and how much of more value are they. And if you can't add a cubit to your life, why bother trying? Consider the lilies of the field. Don't seek what you're to eat and what you're to drink. Now, again, this you have to just put this in the context. There is a mission urgency here. This mission urgency requires that one absolutely trusts that while one is on a mission for the Father, one's needs will be met. This is not a generic God meets the needs of everybody thing, because that we know that doesn't happen. But this is a very specific. Those who are on this journey with Jesus, who are carrying this mission forward, who are bearing witness to him before human beings, these will be taken care of, these basic needs. And so unlike Matthew, who says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, righteousness being a very Matthean term, Luke just simply says, seek God's reign, and these things will be yours as well. And then he adds that this beautiful little phrase, again, fear not, and he's already said this previously in the narrative, don't fear. This is how it works. The Father's with you. He will vindicate you. Don't fear. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you his reign, to come and reign over you. Now, Luke adds this, sell your possessions and give alms. That is not found in any other gospel text. Sell your possessions and give alms. This is only in Luke. Provide yourself with purses that don't grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Okay, again, more on the problem of those who have an abundance and where it's going. Now it gets eschatological here. And Luke is going to now go to Matthew's last discourse, the eschatological discourse, where he talks about the destruction of Jerusalem, and you have the three parables of the wise virgins and the sheep and the goats, etc. Let your loins be girded and your lamps burning. Be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the marriage feast, so that they may open to him at once when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will gird himself and have them sit at the table, and he will come and serve them. If he comes in the second watch or the third and finds them so, blessed are those servants. What's the point of this here? The point of this here is that on this mission, when the master returns to whatever home is, and I think for what we'll see in a minute is Jesus is the master that returns, and home is the church. When he comes home and he finds his servants doing what they're supposed to do, he will turn around and be their servant. And he says this, but know this, if the householder had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let the house be broken into. So you have to stay awake. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an expected hour. Now, this is so far copying Matthew, but Luke adds now, Peter said, Lord, are you telling this parable for us or for everybody? That is, Peter's in the question, this is only in Luke, Peter's question raises the possibility that this parable is not for the masses, but for the disciples. And it says, and the Lord said, who is the faithful and wise steward whom the master will set over his household to give them a portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is the servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. That is, these servants are proving trustworthy. But if the servant says, well, my master's delayed, he begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants and eats and drinks and gets drunk and rules the house like a tyrant for his own satisfaction, when the master comes on that day at an hour he doesn't expect, he will punish him and put him with the unfaithful. This, I believe, is a reference to church leadership in Luke. It's a reference to how leaders in the church can either be those who are faithful stewards or those who use the church for their own benefit. Now remember, Luke is writing around the year 120. The pastorals are written around the same time, as are the letters of Ignatius, okay, and Second Peter. So you take this canon together, and one of the things you find here in this literature, Luke, Acts, the pastoral epistles, the Ignatian epistles, and whatever else I just, Second Peter, what you find is all kinds of material about proper leadership and improper leadership and problems with improper leadership. So when I read this text in Luke, the addition of Peter's question leads me to think that from Luke's perspective, this is a reference to the leadership within the actual congregation. And what is meant by verse 47, the servant who knew his master's will, but did not make ready or act according to his will, shall receive a severe beating. I don't know. But he who did not know and did what deserved a beating shall receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much is given, much will be required, and of him to whom men commit much, they will demand the more. And so I come to a text like this, and I'm saying, what's with all this beating stuff? Is Jesus saying something about the leadership in the church getting a beating? Is that what's going on here? Until I get to the end that says, everyone to whom much is given, of him will be required more. And of him to whom men commit much, they will demand the more. And I'm wondering here if, in fact, what's happening is that we're dealing with, well, I have to tell you, I've consulted the commentaries, and I'm at a complete total loss on this little piece of text. I have yet to try and figure out this beating stuff that's going on here. At any rate, okay. When we get to chapter 12, he's following again, he's gone back to Matthew's missionary discourse. Notice here how he's chunking stuff from the discourses, Matthew 10, the eschatological discourse, the Sermon on the Mount. He's not taking material ad hoc from Matthew. He's using one of these 5 discourses each time. He says, I come to cast a fire on the earth, and I would that it were already kindled. Whoa, this is very eschatological. I have come to cast fire on the earth. I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how I am constrained until it's accomplished. Do you think I have come to bring peace on earth? No. I tell you, I have come to bring division. Oh, now, peeps, just bang, here it comes. For henceforth in one house there will be 5 divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They'll be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against her mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. What's he doing here? He's now saying, I have come not to bring peace, that is unanimity. I have come to create division. I have come to break down the mechanism by which unity is created. I have come to create, Jesus says, mimetic conflict in culture. His presence in culture indeed has for 2,000 years created all manner of mimetic conflict, and there have been all number of divisions as a result of the bringing in of this message of this reign of a nonviolent God. So this text, I've come to cast fire on the earth. In order for the reign of God to come about, it is not a complement to world culture. It's not trying to take this thing of human culture and make it better. It's so completely different. It's going to require a shift of ages or a day of judgment. That is, when one is ended and the other begins. There is nothing in Jesus' teaching about him coming to make the world a better place to live. He has come into the fundamental mechanism of all culture, which is religion. And he has destroyed that in his cross, resurrection, and session at the right hand of the Father, and recognition by the Father that he and he alone is the one through whom and by whom the Holy Spirit is sent. He then said to the multitudes, okay, so now we got a shift of audience here. When you see a cloud rising in the west, you say a shower is coming, and so it happens. When you see the south wind blowing, you say there's going to be scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites. Okay, now here's this introduction of this term again. You hypocrites. You know how to, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky. That is, you can follow weather patterns. You recognize weather patterns. But why don't you know how to interpret the present time? If you can interpret the patterns of the weather, and you know there's a repetition to the patterns of the weather, why are you unable to recognize the patterns that are being expressed in your own time? And why do you not judge yourselves what is right? If you've got a problem with an accuser, before the magistrate, make an effort to settle with him on the way, lest he drags you to the judge hands you to the officer, and the officer puts you in prison. I tell you, you will not get out until you paid the very last penny. Wow. Here we have, think of the logic of the text now. He's made very clear that there's going to be persecution in mission, that they don't need to worry. They don't even need to fear the mob that could destroy their legacy, because the Father will take care of them, will take care of their name, will take care of their life while they're walking this path on this mission. And because there is this persecution. Why is there this persecution? Well, it's because Jesus doesn't come to make things better. He's a catalyst to break down the mechanism that governs all human life. That is transaction, sacrificial thinking. So when we come to this, look, judge for yourselves what is right. If you've got a problem with somebody, you'd better make it right. If you don't make it right, you're going to pay. He's suggesting here that the multitudes have an opportunity to make amends, rebuild the community through making amends, or they will end up divided like the family system that Jesus talks about in the previous paragraph. And so the suggestion here is that this text does not have to do, again, with anything related to hell. This has to do with two ways of forming social relationships. The one, unity through the scapegoat mechanism. Jesus says, I've come to destroy that. The other, look, if you can interpret the signs of the times, if you can interpret the weather, you need to understand there's something happening here, and you'd best make up with those in your life, make amends, because otherwise it's all going to fall apart on you. And that takes me to the end of Luke chapter 12. I'll just, with your permission, leave it running and recording while we talk. So you all can feel free to unmute. Anybody? No?
Well, I was thinking about the section where who's doing the beating
Yeah.
of the leadership and things. Wouldn't that just be the consequences of mimetic theory working out?
Yeah, I thought of that. I thought of that. I did. I want to know, who's doing the beating.
Well, I'd say the congregations.
I
In our day, that certainly is the case. All you have to do is say one thing that angers half or more than half the crowd, and you're out.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. The thing that puzzles me about this text is that reference. If this whole thing is about God is the master, that last line, and of him to whom men commit much, they will demand the more. That's what leads me to think that the whole text needs to be shifted into something anthropological as a reading. So I think you could be right. You could be right.
Like I tell my friend Jimmy, just ask Jesus when you get there. He'll tell you I was right. Not that right is everything. I like that the application of Girard's principles. It's all, since we almost always make our own God, then it's should be recognizable to us at some point that my God that I created is making these judgments.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't apply to the God my judgments as a man. And
Right.
so I appreciate that distinction in many areas, I guess.
Sure. Michael, you didn't talk about 12:10, and that's such a controversial subject. Anyway.
Hang on.
But
12:10.
anybody who speaks the word against the spirit will be forgiven.
Oh, you're right. I did not do that. Give me a second. I just skipped over it. I didn't even notice it in my notes, Linda. Thank you.
197.
Yeah, Mark is the only one that's going to actually exit. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have whoever says a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven. Okay. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, either in this age or in the age to come. According to Matthew, just Luke is simply will not be forgiven. Mark is the only one who says that he says, whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin, for they had said he has an unclean spirit. In other words, if you attribute evil to God, there's no forgiveness for that. If you attribute evil to God, that's something that can't be forgiven. I don't know why. It is interesting that you can speak against Jesus and say he has he's Mark's explanation doesn't quite make sense to me, because if you can Mark just simply says all manner of sins will be forgiven and whatever blasphemies they utter. Whoever blasphemes against the Spirit never has forgiveness. But Matthew and Luke both have that saying prior to that, whoever says a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven. And so they are, in a sense, I think, are transferring what was said about Jesus. If you say he has an unclean spirit, he's casting out demons by Beelzebub, okay, that can be forgiven. But when the Holy Spirit comes, I guess, and you say, you attribute the good things, the good work that the Spirit's doing, you attribute that to the devil while you're done in. I don't know. Tough saying, strange saying. This chapter's full of these weird sayings. I think I did suss the one about the one that casts into Gehenna, but some of these other sayings, the commentaries are of no use either. You know, some of these texts are just enigmatic to me. I mean, I can sit and puzzle on them for days and start, and that's what I always do first is I just sit and do my own work. So I do all my own work and I sit and puzzle it. Then when I'm stuck, I go to the commentators and other literature. And I have to tell you, this week, that was all singularly unhelpful. Haven't quite experienced a dearth of unhelpfulness like that in a long time. Usually I can find things that will help to push my thinking forward, but not this week. I'd be curious to know what my friend James Allison would do with texts like these.
I really like this idea about the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to share real quickly. I feel like the God sort of quickened something to me
Okay.
on in from Luke and the Jesus meeting the two disciples on the road to Emmaus.
Mhm.
And and then I never realized that those guys actually saw Jesus again, and because they went back to Jerusalem and met with the 11, and then Jesus appeared. But the thing that, and I'm just going to share how it touched my spirit. Wasn't from my mind, but it fits with this idea of mission. And he, says, don't be afraid, and did you have anything to eat? And then it says that he showed them his hands and his feet. And the impression I got from that was, guys, this is what the mission is. This sense of giving yourself on behalf of others. And it wasn't to me the sense of, I've always heard it preached, no, this is just evidence that Jesus really was the one who got crucified. But the thing that touched my heart was, this is it, guys. Giving yourself for others is selfless giving. This is what it is.
Yeah.
And it was impactful for me.
Yeah, and like I mean, to your point, this is Luke's emphasis in this section on money, right? And or I should say abundance. I should say those who abundance. This is his whole train of thought. He's not looking for, yes, it is about this self-giving, and it's very concrete. Yeah. This could be a short one today, kids.
Richard, you have no comment, no question?
I'm still here. I feel I'm in danger of getting bogged down in the sort of the detail, the twist and turn on each verse. So in a sense, Michael, I'd like to throw back to you. What would you want? What would you want us, people listening to this talk, the last couple of talks, what would you want us to shift our thinking on, or to be asking more questions? So in other words, if we took a step back.
Okay, so the step back is simple. There is a cost to following Jesus. It may cost you your life. And this is not the Christian martyrdom complex of the conservatives in America. The message of Jesus is a direct threat to all principalities and powers, because Jesus' message is that there is a higher authority. That higher authority being his Father. And when Jesus comes and announces the character of his Father in the midst of cultures that only know these violent gods, and they fail to understand that these gods are idols, they don't work. And that's why society, even though it, quote, progresses technologically, legally, politically, it progresses, it's still the same society everywhere. It's just that we think we're living better now than our predecessors did. We're not. To follow Jesus means to bring a message into a world, a message of peace, being a peacemaker in a world that's oriented toward hostility and the justification of anger and the justification of keeping grudges. When you come in and you say, Jesus tells us not to let this be part of our way of living, you take away an awful lot of what motivates most people, especially Christians. So if you're going to follow Jesus, there is going to be a pattern of life and thinking that you follow that will be a threat to everyone. especially the religious. Capi-
Go on. I was going to say that is, although they may not, or we may not practice it, that is what conservatives, that's how they would handle this. They may not practice it, but it's what they would preach.
Yes, yes, they're hypocrites.
Yeah.
Simple.
I suppose I'm trying to get the new angle in these three chapters. You've hinted at some things that still need to be worked in, you know, the beating and this, that, and the other. But let me see, you said, the Gehenna thing. Let's just run through that again. You were saying that it's about reputation.
Yes, in other words, I asked if we're going to talk about, so first of all, the Greek text doesn't say, fear him who, after he is killed, has the power to cast into hell. There's not a direct object him. It's more literally translated. Let's see. Fear, and then you have an article with an articular infinitive, a participle, and a noun, followed by an infinitive. So it reads like this: fear the, with the, to kill, having authority, one, to cast into hell. Fear that which, after having killed, has authority to cast into Gehenna.
But what you were saying is that we don't need to fear the mob.
Right.
Our Father has higher authority, higher power, and will protect one's legacy. I mean, I'm not unduly worried about my legacy. I don't think it's very substantial at all. But it seems as if this is telling you to fear. Why should we fear the mob?
Because the mob has the power to control the narrative.
But then he goes on to say, don't fear.
That's exactly right. That's what leads me to think there's something going on here that's, I'm even wondering now as we're talking, Richard, we have like 3 steps. Don't fear the person that can kill the body.
Yeah.
Fear that which can cast body and soul, or fear that which, after having been killed, can cast, has authority to cast into Gehenna, and then don't fear. So we've got this thing in the middle about what to fear, and each side of it, don't fear, which leads me to wonder if that middle section is sardonic, ironic. I don't know. I really don't. But I think it has to do with anthropology because of the reference to Gehenna, and Gehenna being the place of sacrifice. So in other words, I'm sure it doesn't have to do with God.
No.
And the comparison of the sacrificial sparrows, if they're so cheap, how much more is your life worth if you're sacrificed to the, yeah, it's puzzling to me.
Well, okay, if we call that one puzzle number 1, and then we go, because I think that there is a couple of these.
Yeah.
Okay. And we might initially expect that they're connected. We then got the one, Linda's one about blaspheming.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might think that you're meant to read verse 10 and fear something. you're meant to fear, or you're meant to be warned about not blaspheming.
Yeah, there's a lot of warning in this text. In this chapter 12, there's a lot of warning. It's suffused with it. But again, that's one of those, it's the fourth of the four themes found in the Deuteronomic prophet-like Moses tradition. So it's, or what the scholars call this the warrant tradition. It's yeah. There is an eschatological warning here about how they're interpreting Jesus and his mission. Absolutely.
So then so puzzle 2 is perhaps the blaspheming thing that Linda mentioned. Then puzzle 3 is perhaps that one that
the beating of the servant.
Yeah, the beating. Even before that, you've got fool this night your soul is required of you. That's probably the only thing that makes immediately relatively clear sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's also a warning. So,
it is also a warning. Yes.
Yeah. Then we've got the beating.
Yeah. There's just a lot of warning in here. About the consequences of rejecting the message or misinterpreting the origin of the message.
At what point do we start to say Luke was just confused?
I would rather say I don't have the skills or the tools to interpret the text than to say the author was confused. In other words, Luke has thought this stuff through, and what he picks from Matthew and his sources and everything else, and he's structured it out. He's laid out a plan, and then he puts papyrus to quill and begins writing, or quill to, So I'm not going to blame Luke. I'm going to blame myself. I lack the interpretive skill right now to make sense of some of these very challenging texts. Because while I can affirm eschatological judgment, I can also affirm eschatological reconciliation of the creation. Yeah, it's.
That's putting it crudely to say that maybe Luke was confused, but with Matthew, we are saying something to the effect of Matthew, consciously or unconsciously, was still weaving Second Temple eschatology in there.
Yeah, it's you hear that in his phrases, forever and ever.
Yeah, but can we
age to age
triangulate backwards and somehow wonder whether Luke is weaving something in there which, like Matthew, we have to weave out?
Well, and I'm not looking to weave anything out. I'm not looking to say I don't like this text. I'm not going to. No, all text has to be interpreted.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I ran up against walls this week in some of these texts. Couldn't make heads or tails of them in terms of wanting to have a consistently healthy eschatology reading of these texts. So I don't know. Again, remembering, not all this goes back to the historical Jesus.
That was my point, really. Yeah.
Is Luke's Christology such that it's not as Pauline as we might think? I don't know. I'm the thing that this project is, excuse me, in the 14 or 15 weeks, I don't know how long we've been doing this now, as I've been exegeting. I've never exegeted Luke this close in my life. This has just been a great time for me. and realizing that there are these texts that are there, and I don't know, dude. At this point, I just have to claim they humble me. They're great texts. They humble me. They show me the limits of my ability to engage.
Well, it's not just you or me, but it's the whole of, as it were, Christendom, really, because as you say, the commentaries haven't done obviously a very good job. If we ask a different question, what can we expect scatologically?
Yeah, I don't think we know. I mean, look, Jesus and Paul both affirm a judgment. So does the Johannine writer. Every biblical writer that preaches the gospel preaches judgment. There's a judgment day. Call it a final exam. Call it evaluation day, like the boss calls you into his office once a year and says, okay, we have to have an evaluation. I don't know what to call it, but it's a day when everything gets revealed and you see yourself as you really are. And the real you is revealed, I guess. Paul implies in 1 Corinthians 3 that laborers in the mission work will go through fire and have their work tested. I'm wondering if this is similar to what's going on here with the Peter question. Lord, is this for everybody or just for us? And we have that, if you do the master's will, gold, silver, precious stones. If you don't, wood, hay, and stubble. I wonder if it's that same logic here with regard to the beatings. You know what I'm saying? But what I can tell you is that there's definitely a day where our life will be evaluated. And that's not a problem. It's just not a problem.
In John 5, Jesus says, will not pass into judgment, but raised to resurrection. I think I'm right.
In John 5, he says, I judge no one. Or the Father judges no one. And in John 10, he says, if it's the other way around. So one text in John, I judge no one, and the other text, the Father judges no one. And again, one thing in Jesus' teaching is we're our own standard of judgment. With the measure you measure. If you want to know what eschatology looks like for you, it's real simple. Just look at your life. If you're looking for forgiveness by the bucketful when you get there, dish it out by the bucketful in this life, because with the measure you measure, you will be measured.
That sounds fairly karmic.
That's Jesus' view of judgment. I don't know. It's karmic would mean that in the next life you get what's coming to you from the previous life. Here, I don't think it's quite like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is I have no fear of death. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, just saying that I'm sort of pondering the difference between a serpent and a son.
Mm-hmm.
And I was struck by something I was reading in George MacDonald this afternoon. And he's saying that the only free man is the one who is the child of the Father, who knows he's the child of the Father. And then it's the line about being the servant of all, but the slave of none.
Yeah.
And it's just it sort of inverts the usual way of looking at things.
Yeah. It sounds very similar to Luther's 1520 freedom of the Christian person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I need to ponder, I think.
Yeah.
but there's a lot in MacDonald about how we have to grow into our understanding that we're the sons and daughters of God.
That's for sure.
And it's a process that we're incomplete. But
Mhm.
if, as a child of God, then the way that God relates to you and perceives you is different.
Yes.
So it puts judgment in a different perspective.
Absolutely, it does. And the thing is if I'm allowing the Father's quote judgment into my life in the present, which is not a negative thing, it's just if I'm allowing the Father to correct me, you know, in the present, there's nothing to worry about in the future. I'm already in the correcting phase, you know.
Yeah.
Hey, I would love more than anything else to be the guy that could come to all these complicated texts and interpret them and say, "Hey, this is how you read this stuff." But that would be completely cocky to make stuff up. And I have to be, even with all of my 47 something years of all this work, I still come up against texts that go bang, you know, it's like they're humbling. They're completely humbling.
What do we make of John 5:24? Whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He does not come into judgment, but has passed from death to life.
What do we make of it? I mean, do you believe that the Father sent Jesus?
Oh yeah. I mean,
And then you've passed from whatever constitute death means to that which is life-giving.
yes, I suppose my head is ahead of my heart in my exodus from conservative evangelicalism. My head is ahead of my heart.
Sure.
So, I'm getting the, but somebody only has to say things like there will be a judgment, and I sort of melt in fear.
Well,
because
listen.
to be quite honest, when my life is revealed on the last day, it's not going to look very pretty.
No. This is what I'm trying to get across, is that when we are revealed, those of us that have followed Jesus, have walked his walk, when we're revealed, as Paul talks about it in Romans 8, it's the glorious day that creation is waiting for. It's not going to be like a movie theater where you watch your life and God sits there like a teacher or a mom, you know, just pointing fingers and this is what you did wrong, this is what you did wrong. Oh, you like that was good. That's not like that at all. There's going to be, think of the fire metaphor, the purging metaphor.
Yeah.
All it gets, as Brad Jersak puts it, God just purges us of our junk at that point. And it's the beautiful part of ourselves.
I think there's another line from George MacDonald that sort of ties in with this. It says that God doesn't punish sin, he destroys it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And by destroying sin, he destroys any ability to connect sin with us.
Yeah. But in the process, frees us up to be what we should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Well, I will look forward to continuing this. I hope you guys saw the new podcast that we've done, and
Yeah.
I think we just finished up session 5, and so we've got a bunch of them in the can. And
Which is this?
it's in the group. I put the links up for your favorite
okay.
app store for the podcast. Yeah, but I thought Lauren did a bang up job, beautiful job on the production of it, as well as coming in each week as a host. So it's been fun. It's been interesting. It's every Monday night now we record, and And it was so funny yesterday. I was just on pins and needles waiting for 8 o'clock. When's 8 o'clock gonna come up? And I've got all these thoughts, So hang on, I'm gonna stop recording here.